Hello, folks. This is a video lecture, as you can see, for CRN 13197 and 13260. Both of these CRNs or courses are World Literature, English 200, and it will be the same video lecture for both. So two sort of initial disclaimers, if you will. One is if during this video lecture my voice becomes hoarse or raspy, it's because back in June I became one of the literally billions of people on the planet who got COVID, and a weird sort of prolonged side effect is sometimes I have this kind of back of the throat cough or whatever. So I apologize in advance if that occurs. The other sort of disclaimer is that this is a video reprise, if you will, because as you can see here, this is up here Friday, August 19th, just couple of days ago, because today is August 21st, I received a notice from YouTube that this English 200 video lecture 4 on the Quran was taken down. And I appealed it under the rationale that, well, it's a video lecture for a college literature course. It's contextualizing Islam and the Quran with close readings of the Quran, and they still denied it. My suspicion is based on what I've highlighted down here at the bottom, where they say that, hold on, if I can get this to change size here. They say down here at the bottom that family content must not contain adult and age inappropriate themes such as violence, sex, death, drugs, etc. The video lecture didn't contain any of those except perhaps violence, when I was contextualizing the background history of both Islam and Christianity, which do in fact have moments of historical violence. So what I've had to do, folks, is remove that information, those slides, which ironically, all of which were found in Google image search, and Google owns YouTube. So you can find it on Google, but you theoretically can't find that information on YouTube. So this is going to be a kind of truncated or revised version of what had been up, this video lecture for literally half a year. I posted it back in spring 2022 in February, and didn't seem to be a problem, but apparently there is now. All right, so I'm going to move into the slide information for the Quran, and what I'm going to do is be working from, so here's the module it's for, quiz 4, module 4, due September 19th, 2022. I'm going to be working from both the text. If you scroll down to the module, this is the PDF version of the syllabus, or if you use the actual module in Canvas, it's all the same. So this information in module 4. So if you click this link right here, it will take you to a PDF file of the Quran over which the quiz is based. And this current link no longer works, right? So if you were to click this link, it would take you to this video has been removed link. Right? There you go. Um, but there are video, excuse me, images and slides and whatnot in our Google folder if you want to access those. All right. So this information on the Quran comes on the heels of three other videos and text. The Hebrew Bible parts 1 and 2, that is basically Genesis parts 1 and 2, and then Tablet 11 of the Epic of Gilgamesh. All of those are, of course, religions, Sumerian Polytheism for the Epic of Gilgamesh, and of course, Judaism for the Hebrew Bible, and the Hebrew Bible, which Christians call the Old Testament, forms the Christian Bible. And so we move to another religion, the Quran, with this information and video lecture. So I'll be using the text here, right? That again, you just click this link right here, this PDF link, and you will have your own copy you can download or follow along. And I'll also be using images to contextualize this. So I have these dates highlighted because these are the dates that, roughly speaking, the angel Gabriel came to Muhammad, who later is known as the Prophet Muhammad, until he dies in 632. So around 610, the story goes that God sent his messenger angel, Gabriel, who, of course, is the same messenger angel that, appears to Mary in the Annunciation of Christ, the baby. And it's during these years that the Quran, as we know it, is developed. The Quran word itself means recitation because, as it describes down here, the actual physical, or excuse me, verbal recitation is trying to emulate what Muhammad had done, right? Of receiving the word and it not being written down there. So it says, this, by the way, is an introduction to the Quran, and all of this, of course, this PDF file here comes from the third edition of the Norton World Literature Anthology. These that are highlighted up here. So the third edition of the Norton Anthology of World Literature. And this particular Quran information comes from volume A here, pages 71 to 87. So in this introduction to the Quran, as I was mentioning a moment ago, it says that, let me find it again, that the Quran itself invites comparison with other literary traditions, most explicitly the rich traditions of oral poetry found in pre-Islamic Arabia. That is to say, the actual physical writing of the book, the verses, the language, the meter, if you will, poetry, because it is like verse, as are many portions of the Bible. Think of Proverbs, right? That it has this kind of rhythmic poetry feel. If you think of current day open mic, which is a probably terrible analogy, but there's a certain rhythm and rhyme to it, and the introduction goes on to say that it can only be appreciated in the musical or oral recitation or tajweed that reveals the rhythmic quality of the verse and the haunting repetition of syllables at the end of successive lines. So the word itself, right, going back up here, means recitation because it's meant to be recited, though many people just read it and don't actually verbalize it. So the basic history, so to speak, of this, and by the way, it's divided up into 144 surahs or chapters, if you will. Here is a reminder, if you didn't already know, that Muslims who are the practitioners of Islam, they, to be devout or, pious or proper, so to speak, Muslim in practice, you pray 5 times a day, right? Different times of the day. But down here, this is on page 73, left-hand column at the bottom, sort of a thumbnail sketch history of the Quran. The Quran was received by Muhammad through the mediation of the angel Gabriel or Jibril. Jibril is how it's spelled and pronounced in the Islamic tradition, but it's the same angel, over a period of about 23 years, beginning when he was 40 years old and ending with his death in 632. So this date, 632, is kind of important for the, historical record, if you will, of Islam, because, it had been, that is, the Quran, the information received from God through the angel Gabriel or Jibril, had only been, as it describes here, recited in oral tradition. And it's not till after his death that it begins to be written down in the sort of form we have it today. During that time, so from roughly 610 to 632, the Quran existed as an oral recitation, repeated both by Muhammad himself and the growing community of Muslims. After Muhammad's death, the community recognized the need to record the oral text to ensure the errors not creep into the recitation. The closest companions of Muhammad, under the supervision of the first caliph or ruler of the Muslim community, Abu Bakr, assembled the Quran in written form. The third caliph, Uthman, supervised the final version of the text, which was completed in 651. So let's, trace this trajectory. The information in the Quran comes from God and is sent from God with his messenger angel, Jibril or Gabriel, to Muhammad, whom Muhammad meets in a cave when he's alone. And these stories, or the information that we find in the Quran, is given only to Muhammad. Thus, he's the prophet, the chosen one. And while he's alive, people begin to recite what he is reciting. And then after he dies in 632, people begin to put together the written form, okay? What I want to point out about that is human beings are fallible. I'm not saying Muhammad was fallible, but Muhammad had died, right? And so there was an effort to, as it says here, ensure the errors not creep into the recitation of the Quran. But unless you had written it down while he was alive, then it's very possible that letter for letter, word for word, people may have slightly augmented what had originally been recited. And in fact, Abu Bakr, right, assembled the first written form, but then much later, the next caliph created the final version. And this is not, new to religion and oral tradition. One of the questions that I pose on essay one, or possible topic for essay one, and it relates to both the Hebrew Bible and tablet 11 of Gilgamesh, is that how is it possible that the story of the flood, as we sort of know it in Genesis through the story of Noah and the flood, how is that story that is almost identical with some minor revisions, how does that appear almost 2,000 years earlier than when Genesis was written by Moses? Well, one potential theory, if you go back and look at the video on Gilgamesh, is that Abraham, who of course is much, much older than Moses, who's writing the first 5 books of the Bible, traveled from where he originated, present day, say, southern Iraq or Kuwait, where Sumerian polytheism of Gilgamesh, right, that religion was being practiced, and he had potentially heard this story, right? And then he travels eventually westward and lands or ends up in what is present day Israel or Canaan, and in the Old Testament or Hebrew Bible. And after hundreds of years, that story remains, but then it's in slightly augmented or modified form from Gilgamesh. So, that's a possibility. I want to use some of these slides to point out, like, for example, this word caliph. So if I have a bunch of slides here to contextualize this text for you. It's not. All right. By the way, that's the last slide in this slideshow, showing the 5 times of day that Muslims pray. So notice here, over beginning really in southern Spain, which is also called Andalusia or Andalusia, the letter C here, and Califate, that word caliphate, as you can see here, the caliphate in 1750. Remember that, Muhammad dies in 632. The caliphate is a term relating to a geographical region or territory that is under the rule or control of the religion of Islam. And the ruler would be called the caliph. So notice that this is kind of color-coded, right? That, the orange portion here are conquests of the Arabs and Saracens up to the death of Muhammad. That is to say, in the orange here, in Arabia, today known as Saudi Arabia. In fact, this whole region is called the Arabian Peninsula. That it began as a series of eventual territorial expansion, and not always in a peaceful way. So here's another image, probably a clearer image of this. So again, Muhammad dies in 632, right? So while in the brown here, he's alive from, or receiving the word from God or Jibril from roughly 610 to 632, then those are the geographical areas that Islam expanded to when he was alive. But afterward, as you can see in the color coding, right, it expanded much further. So 632 to 640 in this kind of rose-colored area, the whole Arabian Peninsula, Egypt, the beginning of spread across northern Africa, and then this sort of light pink or light rose colored 645 to 691, 661 goes into what was called Persia, but today it's mostly what we know as Iran. Not to be confused with Iraq. Iraq is over here where Baghdad is. So, this is a representation of the flourishing of the religion of Islam and the culture of Islam, not just the religion. And it went all the way across northern Africa into, as I mentioned a moment ago, southern Spain, which is sometimes called Andalusia or Andalusia. So yeah, that's you can see here this animated image, the spread over time. And it, gained a pretty strong foothold in certainly, of course, the Middle East, where it remains the dominant religion, but also across, Northern Africa here and other regions. One of the things that I had mentioned in the previous video was the unfortunate misrepresentation of Islam through the overdetermined, kind of caricatured almost representation of all Islamists are jihadists or all Islamists are terrorists, which of course is not true. That was the entire point I was trying to make in that video lecture, but apparently they didn't care. And this is now a outdated but map showing the spread at one point of what was called ISIS or ISIL, not to be confused with the Taliban, which is a different kind of far right faction of conservative Islam. They have similar ideologies, but they're not exactly the same. So this, was in part why we, the United States, after the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, remained in Iraq for so long, and in parts of Syria. As you can see here, the march to Baghdad, right? So these are present day, conservative Islamic men, right? They still dress in the traditional attire with, we might call it a turban, but it's not a turban. And the traditional, religious training garb. And this is what I was referring to earlier about the recitation of the Quran, that from an early age, especially boys, but all Muslims are encouraged, if not in some cases required, to recite the Quran. And there are, in fact, competitions where people recite the entire from, back to front, so to speak. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment instead of front to back. that is the entire recitation, so they have it memorized, right? And they do this in what's called a madras or madras, a school for Islamic learning. Um, so yeah, this is probably a slide I should have taken out from the previous one, showing this sort of split between Afghanistan and Pakistan. And Pashtun is an ethnic minority in the Islamic world. Notice that it straddles two countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan. And, we, the United States, just recently pulled out of, so to speak, Afghanistan for being there for, 20 years or so because of various kinds of conservative far-right Islamic ideologies like the Taliban. Yeah, that's Afghanistan itself, I believe. So let me return to the text. The book, Norton Anthology of World Literature, Volume A here, it doesn't give you the entire Quran. It gives you what we call like excerpts, right? So from, what we call Surah 1, Surah meaning chapter or book, they just have the opening, just, like you might in the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament, in the beginning was the word, right? And so what we have here for pages 71 to 87 is a long excerpt from Surah 5 called The Feast. The feast, of course, is not just for any perhaps actual festival, but it means any kind of meal, any kind of eating of food. And this may sound familiar to you when you start reading how closely in some ways it is allied with Judaism about what to eat, how to eat it, and so on. And in the world of this here, the world of Judaism, for something to be considered proper food, according to the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, right, it needs to be what's called kosher, right? There's a similar word, not word, but idea called halal. So I'm probably not now spelling it right. So halal is roughly, as you see here, the sort of, I wouldn't say equivalent, but kind of parallel stricture set of rules, regulations, law, if you want to call it that, in Islam, of things that you can and cannot eat and how to consume them, right? So, dietary restrictions and so on. People of the book, this is a reference to, Christians or Jews. And of course, the book, they mean what we think of as the Bible, right? That's in fact used in this text. So this section begins, with you who believe, fulfill your obligations. That is, followers of Islam, follow your laws, your commandments, if you want to think of them like that. Livestock animals are lawful as food for you, with the exception of what is about to be announced to you. You are forbidden to kill game while you're on a pilgrimage. God commands what he will, so you who believe do not violate the sanctity of God's rights, the sacred month, that is Ramadan, the offerings, the garlands, nor those going to the sacred house to seek the bounty and pleasure of their Lord. But when you have completed the rites of pilgrimage, you may hunt. So speaking of pilgrimage and the sacred house, notice there's a footnote there. This refers to one of the 5 pillars, if you will, of Islam called the Hajj, H-A-J-J, as we spell it in Western culture. And the Kaaba is the central or focal point of the pilgrimage, from all over the world to this place in Mecca, right? There's a spelling of Hajj, H-A-J-J. So it's during, this pilgrimage that Muslims are forbidden to, consume or kill game while they're on that pilgrimage. Also, they're forbidden to eat carrion. Carrion is, like roadkill, if you will, or you find, something dead by natural causes, or, you didn't kill it yourself. You leave that to the vultures. You don't eat it yourself. Blood, meaning actual blood, or raw meat, if you want to think of it like that. What we might call beef tartare. Beef tartare is just simply finely ground up beef that's raw, or sushi for that matter. It's fish that's raw. Pig's meat, right? So any kind of pork is forbidden to Muslims as it is to Jews. And any animal over which any name other than God's has been invoked, right? Any animal strangled or a victim of a violent blow or fall, right? So going back to this notion of halal, right? There is a very kind of specific way to, consume food, So one of the concerns is, you don't, as we do in Western culture, you don't shoot the animal in the head. It's a kind of, should be anyway, thought of as a kind of sacred right. And you think Allah in this case, or God, for right, here are all the kind of laws, strictures around food. But anyway, similar to the Old Testament. And that's part of the reason I wanted to include the Quran, is I wanted you all to see, and I say you all, I mean most Grambling students are not only from the South, but they're often raised in a what we call Judeo-Christian environment or religion. Judeo-Christianity is just simply taking both the Old and the New Testaments together. So the first part, Judeo, coming from Judaism, right? It's just it's wrong to or inaccurate to say someone who believes in the Ten Commandments, let's say, and doesn't eat pork and so on, practices circumcision and whatever is in the Old Testament is a Christian, right? Because those principles aren't really in the New Testament, right? So in the Old Testament, right, those laws and regulations and practices are, but taken together, right, the Old and the New Testament is Judeo-Christian. So the reference here to the people of the book, right, is very specifically, in this case, the Jews, because, it's a reminder that, say, in the New Testament, there aren't really strictures against eating pork. I mean, think about a common, Easter dish, which is a holiday ham, for Easter, and that's to celebrate the rise or resurrection of Christ. But there is certainly in the Old Testament against pork, right? So moving on to some of these other slides. This is, I believe this is Afghanistan. Yeah. Some more Taliban members, as you can see here down at the bottom, how they would dress and appear today. And another map showing the conquests. And I say conquests because, it's true. These expansions here where you have like a kind of like crossed swords are legitimate historical conflicts or battles between Islam or Muslims and other religions, So this is also true of Christianity. I mean, Christianity has its, as I mentioned earlier, historical moments of violence. Think of the Crusades, right? They went down on many, many occasions over some centuries from Central and Eastern Europe down to what is present day Middle East, or, the goal was to get you to Jerusalem, where, of course, Christ was crucified. And the idea was to take over Jerusalem, which they didn't do. But, as you can see here in the legend, purple is Christian, gold is Muslim, that there were these fights, between Christians and what Christians called the infidel. And there's also a long history of the Christian church using violence against non-believers during what's called the Spanish Inquisition, beginning in the 1500s, like this, putting someone they believed was either a Jew or a Muslim on trial for, let's say, not eating pork, right? Which would have been sort of, a signal to Christians that, oh, this person is a practicing Jew or Muslim. So I can't apparently show you those images and slides of the Spanish Inquisition, but you can go find them readily because it was a real historical moment in Christianity. Okay, so the the Quran itself, this is a beautiful calligraphic or calligraphy form of the Quran. It's written in Arabic, and here's maybe a more kind of modern translation of, not translation, but rendering of the Arabic. One of the things the text tells us in the introduction is that if it's not written in Arabic, then it's not considered a legitimate Quran. Where is that? True. Okay. Where is that? I know it's in here. Well, let me just search the word. Well, sorry. At the moment, again, find this. This is terrible. It is in here though. That oh my gosh, right there in front of me. Mea culpa. Um, and by the way, this introduction is written by the editors of the Norton Anthology of World Literature. So this is not, Muslim or an imam. Imam would be a religious leader in Islam writing this introduction as the Norton Anthology editors. So as divine speech, moreover, the Quran can never be rendered perfectly in the medium of the human voice, a deficiency that testifies to its fundamental inimitability or ijaz. Inimitability means like not fully able to be realized. In accord with this view of the nature of the Quran, no translation into any other language is thought of as actually being the holy book itself. So I mention this because, if you are a Muslim or a Muslim, would see this video, they would agree that what is being rendered down here in English translation is really not the Quran, right? Because remember, the information was given from God to Gabriel and to Muhammad. And Muhammad, of course, spoke in Arabic and it was recited in Arabic for a long time. So a legitimate Quran must appear in Arabic, as you see here. What I was saying earlier about, in the madras, Islamic learning and teaching, they would recite it from back to front instead of front to back. Is, by the way, this is what, sentence in Arabic would look like, or a paragraph in the Quran. So unlike in Western culture where we read from left to right, from front to back of a book, they read just the opposite. This is again an ancient, beautiful, kind of artistic rendering of verses of the Quran. So they would begin literally in the back here of the book and read from right to left and turn pages from, left to right to go to the front of what we call the front of the book. Also, another thing, right, about Islam is they also use prayer beads to pray. And that's not uncommon. I mean, if you think of, say, Buddhism, there are prayer beads. If you think of the rosary in Catholicism, which is the original form of Christianity, there are prayer beads. And the reason I have this image here is to kind of remind us that Muslims really do believe, as Muhammad said, like this is the divine word of God. So therefore, nothing in it can be wrong. Just as many Christians are taught in Christian doctrine or theology that the Bible is the word of God and God is infallible, therefore the Bible can't be wrong. So as I mentioned, there's a pretty widespread adherence to Islam across the world. And, the darker colors is where it's more prevalent. What I want you to notice of Africa, though, is what is commonly called the African partition, if you will, that generally speaking, most of the countries in Northern Africa either currently do practice Islam or it's the dominant religion in Islam. Whereas in the south here, sort of below the Sahara Desert and equator, most dominant religion is Christianity in various forms, whether it's, you know, a kind of African Episcopal or, you know, maybe even Pentecostal. But that's because of the missionaries coming in Central and West Africa over the centuries. So here, a Muslim would believe that, of course, this right here on the right side is the actual legitimate Quran, but any translation of it would not be, right? But I just want to show you this, that there are, if you wanted to, if you're interested, out there, translations of the Quran, because, you know, most people aren't fluent in Arabic, which you would need to be pretty decently to read the Quran. So, by the way, there's a reference to the Hajj again, which I'll mention in a moment about the pilgrimage. I mentioned this or showed this slide in both the video 1 lecture on the part 1 of Hebrew Bible and also Gilgamesh. If you look at these arrows here going from oldest to youngest, if you will, chronologically, Sumerian Polytheism, which was really the religion of Gilgamesh and people living in that southern region of present-day Iraq, that's the religion they would have practiced, and it began, you know, thousands and thousands of years ago. Maybe slightly older, in fact, than Egyptian polytheism. Remember, you know, polytheism is multiple gods rather than a monotheism like Judaism. And then so that's what we begin with, you know, in Hebrew Bible Part 1, Judaism. And then, you know, Christ dies in the year 0. Or, I'm sorry, my bad. He is born in the year 0, and he dies in the year AD 33, Anno Domini, AD. That's what that stands for, not, you know, this, yeah. It's a Latin phrase for the year of our Lord. But then notice that Islam begins over half a millennium after Christ is born. And Islam is, or can be, I wouldn't say it is, but it can be seen as a corrective to both Judaism and Christianity, because in points in the Quran, which you can find in our excerpts here, there are, well, there's no other way to say it than there are criticisms of Judaism and or Christianity for their practices or their beliefs, that those two religions have gone astray from the true religion, which in this case would be Islam. As you may have seen, the same image in the Hebrew Bible videos, it's, you know, Islam, the sort of second, you know, largest in terms of practitioners, religion, probably more Christians, right? And Judaism is not nearly as large. In Islam, there is the Quran. In Judaism, there is what they just called the Bible. And In Christianity, there's the Old Testament and the New Testament, or the Jewish Bible and the New Testament. And then there are these ancillary or sort of supplemental texts that form the faith in each one. In Judaism, it's the Talmud and the Midrash and the Responsa. In the Quran, or in Islam, it's what's called the Hadith, a collection of writings by, in this case, Islamic leaders or imams, whereas in Christianity, popes and cardinals and religious leaders would write the same kind of supplemental text. This is just a kind of similar comparison of the three. For example, in Islam, a caliph, also more commonly today known as an imam, I-M-A-N, and a reverend, priest, or minister in Christianity, and then a rabbi in Judaism, all similar kinds of, religious leaders. And so going back to the text here, there's a command to practice what we call ablution, or sort of cleansing yourself before you pray. And there's a whole ritualized practice of this in Islam. Most Christians and Jews, for that matter, don't, adhere to the practice that, the 5 times a day or how many times a day you pray, that you are supposed to literally clean your hands, your face, your ears, your feet, and so on. But it's just this traditional form of respect for communing with God, different again than Christianity. So I want to point out what I mentioned a moment ago about the kinds of what we call judgments or criticisms by Islam to Judaism and Christianity. And this is at the bottom of page 75. So it begins here, people of the book, right? And here the footnote says Jews and Christians. People of the book, our messenger, and by the way, our is the sort of royal plural pronoun, like when the Queen of England is sitting on the throne, she does not say, I want my government to do this. She instead says, we declare the government should do X, Y, or Z. It's not a personalized thing. It's meant to represent her manifold or multi-layered magnificence. And the same is true in this usage of our or we, when God says we took a pledge, right? That is really God. Our messenger, so that would be Jibril or Gabriel, our messenger has come to make clear to you much as what you have kept hidden of the scripture, and to overlook much you have done. And again, he's talking here about Jews and Christians. A light has now come to you from God, and a scripture making these clear, with which God guides to the ways of peace those who follow what pleases him, bringing them from darkness out into light by his will, and guiding them to the straight path. Okay, so here's what is the light, so to speak, the truth. Those who say God is the Messiah, the Son of Mary, are defying the truth. So this is an English translation of the Arabic Quran, and it says here, those who say God is the Messiah, the Son of Mary, are defying the truth. Right? And footnote here about, Jesus is the Redeemer, came to die for everyone's sins. He's, the Messiah. And then he will come again. They are defying the truth. Say, if it had been God's will, could anyone have prevented him, God, from destroying the Messiah, son of Mary, together with his mother and everyone else on earth. Control of the heavens and earth and all that is between them belongs to God. He creates whatever he will. God has power over everything. The Jews and the Christians say, we are the children of God and his beloved ones. Instead, then why does he punish you for your sins? You are merely human beings, part of his creation. So these are some theological differences between Christianity and Islam. Going back to this first one, if it had been in God's will, could anyone have prevented the God, from destroying the Messiah? And they're talking here about, Christ being crucified. And what they're getting at is this notion of what Christians think of as the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, right? So it's a theological conundrum. If you think about the interconnection of the Holy Trinity, that they're all incarnations of the same thing, really, of God, different forms of God, right? So sorry, I don't know why this is. So the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, or Holy Ghost, right? They all are different manifestations of the one true God in Christianity. Judaism does not believe this notion of the triple incarnation or the Holy Trinity, but of course Christianity does. But what Islam here, or Islam through Muhammad's recitations, are saying is, so if God sent his son, right, down on earth and then crucified his son, how can he really do that when really God is the same thing that God is the son, right? Like, how can God kill himself is the basic point there. The other problem is certainly a theological one. Like, why does God punish you for your sins? You're merely human beings. In other words, if, as it goes in Christian theology, God is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, that he's all powerful, all knowing, and everywhere, and omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, yeah, everywhere. That if God knows everything, he's omniscient, then he already knows that, for example, Adam and Eve are going to sin. He already knows what your sins are. He already knows how the entire universe and, now and forever, so to speak, is going to play out. So why does he punish you for your sins? I mean, Christians might argue, well, it's a reminder that we failed the test, not to follow God's commandments or laws, right? That human beings have free choice, and if we don't follow God's will, then he punishes us. I mean, you could argue that, as many people do, but Islam is not really, buying that. So, yeah, there are problems, if you will, between Islam, and God. Here's another. Those who wage war against God and his messenger and strive to spread corruption in the land should be punished by death, crucifixion, the amputation of an alternate hand and foot, or banishment from the land. Disgrace for them in this world, and then a terrible punishment in the hereafter, unless they repent before you overpower them. So who would be, waging war against God and his messenger to spread corruption in the land? Well, it'd be anyone who doesn't practice Islam, right? And so who doesn't practice Islam? Christians and Jews in particular, right? Yeah. So speaking of which, there is a lot of information that you guys, oh, by the way, here's a similarity, one of many, many, many between Islam and Judaism, Islam and Christianity. So in the Quran in Surah 3, Book 3, this is a, kind of announcement of the, not Messiah, but just Jesus, the Christ child to Mary. And it's almost identical in Luke, right? Remember, the New Testament and Christianity appears hundreds of years, over 500 years before the Quran, right? So they dovetail and they connect in many similar ways. There are points of departure, as I noted earlier, with the theological issues. And I mentioned or showed this slide in the, I believe it was second video lecture about Noah and the flood and Gilgamesh. So one of the departures here has to do with Abraham and his second wife. His first wife is Sarai, or later Sarah. Her name is changed, just like Abraham's name is originally Abram, and then to show his divinity is changed from Abram to Abraham, just as Saul's name is changed to Paul in the New Testament. Well, Sarah and Abraham, they first have Isaac, and then Sarah is much too old to have another child, so he, Abraham, has sexual relations with Hajjar, who was in fact an Egyptian slave girl, really, to put it bluntly. And she and Abraham produce Ishmael. And from Ishmael's line is where Muhammad can trace his lineage, not through Jacob and the 12 sons or 12 tribes of Israel. So you can see here in a more kind of direct way. So Abraham and his wife Sarah have Isaac, and that follows the 12 tribes of Israel, the Hebrew people, or also known as the Israelites. And eventually from that is Jesus Christ, and from Jesus Christ comes Christianity. But Abraham and his wife Hajjar, have Ishmael, and then eventually the Arab people, where of course Muhammad traces his lineage to, and therefore Islam. So that's another point of departure in between the two religions. It comes, from the Old Testament. Another point of departure that I mentioned earlier, just to clarify, is that Christ is thought of as a prophet, as all of these others are. In Islam, he is known as Isa, Jesus in Christianity. But he's just another one in a long line of prophets like John the Baptist. But here in, the final one in large letters is Muhammad. And by the way, I'm supposed to be saying, but I'm not a Muslim, I don't mean disrespect, but this is Arabic for peace be upon him. So that the tradition goes, if you don't know, out of respect, that every time you say Muhammad's name, you're supposed to say right after, peace be upon him. So Muhammad, peace be upon him, the prophet, is the practice. But all of these pretty much appear in the Old Testament, right? All of these, including Adam, according to Islam, right, are the prophets from God. And so you'll recognize most of the names, right, that appear in the Old Testament. So another important departure. I just threw this in here because I'm talking about differences in of religion, but I just wonder, like we all practice, not we all, many people practice different faiths, different belief systems, but do we have to kill each other? But that's often what happens. So here's the crescent moon and star of Islam. Here's the peace sign for pacifism, no war. The equality sign of men and women being treated equally. The Star of David for Judaism. The candle, if you will, star of light for Buddhism. The yin and yang of Taoism and Shintoism, and the of course cross for Christianity. So the story of Muhammad, and this is right here, Muhammad, therefore, again, down here, peace be upon him. And this is the seal. There's supposed to be, a seal on the back of his back, like a tattoo, or a brand, if you will. These are the old sort of tribal regions, if you will, of what are Arabic peoples, because this is the Arabian Peninsula, at the time or around the time that Muhammad starts receiving the word from Jibril. And the first place that becomes the most important in Islam, the holiest place, is Mecca. So it's right outside of a cave in Mecca that Muhammad receives these visions or recitations, if you will, stories from Gabriel. The second most important place in Islam is Medina, where Muhammad sets up a mosque. And then the third, perhaps most important, is Jerusalem up here in Israel, present-day Israel, as we'll see. So here is the hillside outside of Mecca where the actual cave is. So this is believed to be the actual cave where Muhammad received his prophet stories or prophecies, excuse me, from the angel Jibril or Gabriel. And so here in this rendering, and by the way, this is sort of out of keeping with Islamic tradition, just so you know that as a sign of respect, devout, pious Muslims would say that you never show Muhammad's face because, he's sort of like a divine, angelic creature. And so his face would either be scratched out or in a kind of veiled. But this is a rendering of showing, obviously over here, the angel Jibril or Gabriel giving the word of God to Muhammad the Prophet, peace be upon him. And then, as I mentioned, he travels from Mecca to Medina, spreading the word, and eventually to Jerusalem. And this is an incredibly important epicenter of religion on this planet Earth. It is what is known as Old Jerusalem, and three, perhaps four, if you wanted to include Greek Orthodox, Armenian Christianity, but three main religions all claim this holy ground in Jerusalem as their space, if you will. And I'll kind of walk you through this here. So the first mosque outside of what is present-day Saudi Arabia was this mosque right here, the Al-Assad Mosque, where unfortunately recently some real problems occurred, like a few months ago, between the Palestinians and the Israelis, the Jews. And this here, beautiful Dome of the Rock, excuse me, Dome of the Rock Mosque, is not, even though it's more spectacular, it's not the original one. But this whole region in here is considered what is called the Islamic or Muslim quarter of Old Jerusalem. And this wall here is called the Western Wall. I'm sorry, I'm mistaken. It. The Western Wall is over here. And really, the entire structure, as you can see here, is the remnants of actual King Solomon's temple. Right? Remember King Solomon in the Old Testament, King Solomon of the Jewish faith. And so over here is what is left of the Jewish temple. There's the Dome of the Rock Mosque, beautiful. And this is the steeple or cross on the top of the steeple of what's called the Church of the Sepulchre. The sepulchre is where Christ was laid to rest when he was crucified. And so there was a church built over that. Remember, Christ is crucified on Mount Calvary in Jerusalem. But you can see here that there's a Christian church, there's an Islamic mosque, and then there are the remnants of the Jewish temple, which is right here, the Western Wall. So if I go back to that other image here, you can see here that this right here, this portion where people are gathering out here is called the Western Wall, also known as the Wailing Wall. It's because of where Jews will go to pray, and often they, are lamenting some loss, but it has to also do with the loss of the might and power of the temple of King Solomon and so on. And here's a map showing you the different quarters, right? So it's a country and a city, Israel and Jerusalem, that is under lots of tension and religious strife. So we, the United States, find Israel as an ally because, remember, Judeo-Christianity, the first part of the Christian Bible is really the Jewish Bible, the Hebrew Bible. And as you can see here, Israel right here is on the, eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea. And Tel Aviv is the sort of financial and maybe cultural capital of Israel. Israel is a very, progressive country these days through a lot of our support. But Jerusalem is sort of the perhaps historical and religious center of Israel. But this country is under, as I mentioned, lots of strife because, as you can see here, there to this day are portions here represented in gold or yellow that are claimed by Muslims, right? So the Golan Heights up here, and by the way, this is the River Jordan. So if you are Christian and you've heard gospel songs about the River Jordan, this is the River Jordan connecting the Sea of Galilee right here, the sea that Christ walked on, and the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is sort of like the equivalent of, Salt Lake City, if you will. It's dead in the sense that it's highly salinic or highly salt ridden, and so not a lot of creatures. There is some life in it, but it's not like say a normal lake or inbound sea. Anyway, so the Golan Heights up here, the West Bank, right? There's Jericho, Bethlehem, where Christ is born, and then what's known as Gaza Strip. So all three of these regions are where what are called the Palestinians, who are Muslim, live. However, as you can see from this image, uh, they lived all over what is present day Israel, and up until roughly 1945-46, when Jews started returning from Europe. Remember, during the 1940s in Europe, the horrific Holocaust, and afterwards Jews said, maybe we should go back and reclaim what is called our promised land, right? In Canaan. And so notice that the green eventually begins to be whittled down over years through a lot of US support and humanitarian and military aid to Israel to get rid of the Muslims and Palestinians. And, we, the United States, find Israel as an ally. So we give them roughly, and this is just in 1 year, probably not, and this is an old, chart, but so that's not million, but that's $4.6 billion in aid, 4.6 billion per year, right? Yeah. So there's a reason why it's a very advanced culture and one of the most sophisticated militaries on the planet, right? This is the Hajj, the pilgrimage, and this is the first, if you will, mosque outside of Mecca here. And there are literally thousands and thousands of people who every year journey to this mosque to get right here to what's called the Kaaba. And the Kaaba is this centrally located kind of epicenter of Islam. So no matter where you are on the planet, you are supposed to face this spot right here, the Kaaba, and this first mosque. It is considered the most holy place in Islam. And there is a very ritualized walking and praying over a period of days, right, that you do. And everyone is dressed in roughly the same way to remove class distinction, right? So if you're a doctor, lawyer, professor, whatever, you really can't tell if you're wearing the same kind of garb, right? Also a show of, humility and respect. But here's the Kaaba up close. And inside of it, there's not a lot going on. This is an image where you can see people are praying. Part of Islamic prayer is to kneel and supplicate yourself, bend down forward. And generally speaking, in a kind of traditional way, Muslim women and men pray separately, but this is one time when you might find them next to each other. And this is what they are trying to get close to. It's called the Hajjar Al-Asvad. And what it is, well, this red part is simply resin, if you will, but these are fragments, or what is left, fragments of a black stone in Islam called the Hajjar Al-Aswad that was the place, as this story goes right here, where Muhammad himself placed this black stone as a marker of where the first mosque should be built. So there, as this image is portraying, there was this faction on one side and the other about where the mosque should be built, here or there, and this stone falls from the sky, and Muhammad interprets this as a sign from God that this right here, where where it falls is where it's supposed to be built. And out of this stone are left these fragments. Okay. Now, you or I, who maybe don't practice Islam, might think a stone falling from the sky, in its scientific explanation, is called a meteorite. Right? A meteor is much, much bigger, the kind of thing that took out, the dinosaurs, perhaps. So this is what they're trying to get close to, as you can see. And it's in the sort of corner, side of the building. They're trying to either touch it, thus it, being worn down, or if possible, kiss it, because it is considered the most holy, like this guy down here trying to kiss it, most holy relic, if you will, in Islam, because of course, it came from God and Muhammad touched it, right? So it's holy. But what I want to point out about holy relics is that's not new to a religion, or it's not unique to a religion. In this case, this is called the Shroud of Turin. And as you can see here, it looks like there is a person's face. And you can see the ribs and the hands. And this is believed to be the actual shroud in which Christ was buried for 3 days before he rose. And so this is believed by especially Catholics to be the image of God or the Son of God. And it goes on tour periodically. It's normally housed in the Vatican in Rome, but under guard, right? Here's the Pope, La Papa, praying in front of it, because they really do believe that it is the legitimate thing, right? So remember, the story goes that Christ is on the cross and he's nailed in the hands, as most people think, but it's really a kind of misnomer. Your body would fall from the weight. So actually, you would be nailed, as the Romans did, between your ulna and radius, right above your wrist, and that would hold your weight. So if you go back and look at the image, you'll see that that's actually where the blood stains occur. But he was also hastened on by a Roman soldier with a lance to the chest, right? To make him bleed out, if you will. So there are, nail stains, blood stains, right? There's a spear mark. So this is an X-ray image of it, right? So again, right here between the ulna and the radius, not in the actual mandibles or hands, right? There's a blood stain here on the side, right? So this is believed to be Christ. Oh, also blood stains from a crown of thorns. So what the parallel I'm trying to make is, don't perhaps scoff at the, stone in the Hajj, or the Hajjar Al-Asvad, because there are, in fact, Christians, or in this case, Catholics, who believe that, it is a legitimate relic. Yeah. And again, inside, this is a Spanish diagram, but as you can see, there's not a lot inside other than beautiful calligraphy and, these columns. So these are the 5 pillars or principles, if you will, of being, a Muslim and practicing devoutly. The creed, which of course is what you preach, and really, the recitation, the Quran, prayer, salat 5 times a day, fasting or psalm. Fasting, of course, occurs typically during Ramadan, the holy month, the Hajj, the pilgrimage, and zakat, almsgiving, right? And Christians have tithing, right? It's not unheard of. So different kind of representation of the 5 pillars, and many different beautiful mosques around the nation. This is the Blue Mosque in Istanbul, Turkey. Yeah. So inside of a mosque, you will not find representations of, as you do in, say, a Christian church or Catholic church especially, statues of people, of what we call realism in art. You'll instead find a lot of ornate, what we call Byzantine architecture, mosaics and things. And by the way, this is, prayer rugs in a mosque facing all in one direction. So this is what I meant by these tile mosaics. In a mosque, I mentioned this earlier, you are supposed to pray, or every Muslim is supposed to pray, whether in a mosque or out of a mosque, anywhere, facing toward Mecca, regardless of where you are on the planet, right? So this is, as you can see here, in Cambridge, right? It's in London, in Britain. So here you can see north down there, the compass reading north. And that means you have to sort of figure out, well, where is, in the UK, where is Mecca in relation to, roughly, Northern Europe, right? Because Britain is in Northern Europe. So here's the prayer room, and you see that it's at an entirely different angle than the rest of the mosque, right? Because here's the front of, as you can see here by this, floret circle, the front of the mosque, and it's facing roughly south-southeast, right? Because that would be the direction if you're in Northern Europe, in this case, Cambridge, England, where you would need to face toward Mecca, right? Same thing here in a different, the prayer room is a different angle than the rest of it. Beautiful, beautiful buildings, in art form. This again, classical Byzantine architecture. And the praying, of course, can be done inside or outside, but there's typically, and you may have seen this in TV and film, a minaret here, which is this tower where you have a call to prayer. It's often done now with speakers, but it used to be done by someone who is, trained in the call to prayer. And it's a beautiful, recitation. Here are people praying in a mosque, and you can see here again the separation between women on the left side and men on the right side. And that has to do with a kind of protocol, if you will, about how you pray, right? So here you can see in this one movement where your face is down and your backside is not. And it would be, considered immodest if women are praying right next to men in that fashion. So there's a prayer guide for men, and you can see here how the heels are meant to be fashioned when you're at this particular stage in the prayer. And then there's a prayer guide for women, and you can see how their heels are supposed to be together at the same point in the prayer, right? As to keeping basically their feet and legs together. So yeah, there are, if you want to learn how to pray in these are the kind of phonetic pronunciation of the Arabic, with all the steps, if you want to go learn how to do this. It's not the Arabic itself, but it's what it would sound like phonetically. And there are, as I mentioned, there are 5 times a day that people would pray. And you can even buy apps, as you can see here, about which way to face based on your location, where Mecca is, right? So yeah, that's it for, I think, this lecture. I think I covered all of the points that are in the text that help clarify the quiz. There is one last one I perhaps ought to mention. It's on I think the last page. And it has to do with the Pharaoh. Because again, there are a lot of parallels. So remember that, the Israelites were in Egypt, basically slaves, under the, there's Moses and Aaron, under the rule of the Pharaoh to build basically the, pyramids, So says we, and it's really God, right? Not, Moses and Aaron, but remember it's God telling Jibril to Moses, we took the children of Israel across the sea. Pharaoh and his troops pursued them in arrogance and aggression. And then it goes on to say, but as he, meaning the Pharaoh, as he was drowning, he cried, I believe there is no God except the one children of Israel believe in. I submit to him. So according to Islam, what they're saying is before, remember the parting of the Red Sea that Moses does, that as he's pursuing the Israelites out of Egypt, that, I suppose as the waves are crashing down, that the Pharaoh actually converts to Judaism or monotheism. Remember, there's a kind of polytheism of multiple gods in Egyptian theology. So, yeah, according to Islam, the Pharaoh converts to, well, children of Israel would be Judaism, but I'm sure here in the Quran that Islam would say, no, it's Allah. But it's, oh, by the way, I think you guys know it's the same God, right? And in order chronologically, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, it is the exact same God of Abraham, Adam, and so on, right? All right, folks, so I think that does it for this long video. Apologies for not only having to remake it, but having to repost it and everything. So this is again for module 4 of quiz 4 due September 19th. All right, folks, take care. Hope you're well.